Hello, everyone, and welcome to Track 1, Strengthening Your Care and Support Team, which is sponsored by Horizon Pharma. My name is Anne-Marie Bingo, and I'm excited to be hosting for this morning breakout Track 1 sessions. As a reminder, this track is being live-streamed, and I would like to welcome our remote attendees and remind everyone that it's not too late to download our mobile app and use some of our highlighted features like the live Q&A. This session is all about how to advocate for your child at school. Our speakers today will be discussing the opportunities and challenges that exist within the education system. Speaking on this topic, I would like to welcome Piper Paul, attorney, Tisha Brown, interim principal at Gullet Elementary School, and Gay Grossman, advocate and founder of ADCY5.org. Thank you.
Hello, thanks for coming. Welcome to our presentation. It's on the opportunities and challenges of advocating for rare kids in schools. Today, you're going to be hearing three different perspectives. I'm a parent attorney. I represent students and parents for children with disabilities. You hear Tisha Brown, an administrator from a school system in Austin, Texas. And then you have Gay Grossman, who's a parent advocate here in California and has a parent with a rare disease. It's a wonderful opportunity to be asked to speak here at Global Genes and to have a panel with three different perspectives. We'll each spend about 15 minutes presenting, and at the end we're going to leave about 15 minutes for any questions. We've prepared also a resource handout that has a pretty extensive list of different resources. Our emails are here as well, and feel free to email any of us with questions if you don't get to ask us questions today. I have a lot of helpers today. Thank you. So I get the very exciting part about talking about the law. What I'd like to do in my 15 minutes is sort of just give you an overview. Some of this you may be familiar with. So with kids with rare diseases, every child is individual. Some of your children have physical disabilities, cognitive disabilities. You can have speech and language disabilities. Some of your children need occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and language therapy. Some of your children have dietary restrictions, difficulty going to school, difficulty getting up. It really is all individual. There's two main areas that your children are protected under the law. One path is going to be under the Individual Disability Education Act, which is we're going to be talking about IEPs, Individual Education Plans. And the other tract is under Section 504 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act and the American Disability Act. And they go together, and under that, you're going to get a Section 504. So I'm going to start off with talking about, it's called, you'll hear IDEA, the Individual Disability Education Act. This, if possible, is the route that you really want to go down. This will allow you to have the most protection for your child. Now, your child may not qualify for this, and if your child doesn't qualify for this, that's okay. You still may be entitled to Section 504 protections, which is part of the American Disability Act. But I'd like to first talk about the IDEA. So all of these laws are federal laws. States must follow the federal law. They can give more rights, but they cannot give less. Some of your states are going to say, oh, well, we don't have to follow that law. It's a state. We can do what we want. That's not accurate. All states must follow these laws, period. So if you're ever told that, you need to do a little research. Now, states can interpret certain sections. For instance, parents have to have informed consent. You have to be an informed member. Okay, what does that mean? Well, that might mean that you have a right to a copy of the evals in advance of the PPT. Well, some states may say you get 5 days. Some states may say you have 3 days. Those are the areas where states have a right to interpret what that means. And that's where some of the nuances can somewhat come in, where there is a little flexibility on the states. But it didn't change the overall rule and regulations that parents have a right to informed consent. So back to IDEA. So it's a federal law that governs how districts provide early intervention, that's going to be your birth to 3 services, special education, and related services to children with disabilities. Related services, what that means is your school districts must provide speech and language services, occupational therapy, physical therapy, could be assistive technology. Maybe your child is nonverbal and cannot communicate. Well, your child may be, I just forgot the word. Assistive technology may be the way to go, but not necessarily a PEC system. Maybe it's a little bit beyond that. Maybe it's an assistive technology evaluation that you look at with wraparound services into your home. That device comes home, that it's actually a communication device where your child's going to learn how to communicate and you're going to learn how to use the device as well. So that's part of the related services. The purpose of the IDEA, and this is what's really important, is to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate public education. You've probably heard this word FAPE. FAPE, 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 FAPE. That's what FAPE is. Free, appropriate public education. That might even mean free is the part that if the school district cannot provide the appropriate public education for your child, that may end up meaning that they have to pay for a private school for your child. So there's ways that can happen, but they have to provide the appropriate public education and it has to be free to you. That emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet the unique needs and prepare your child for either further education, employment, and independent living. So some children, it might be independent living. What does that look like? Some of the ADL skills, brushing your teeth, getting up in the morning, making your bed, transportation, maybe calculus, AB calculus is not the skill. Well, how are you going to use a debit card? How are you going to get back and forth? Why can't you go to college? So maybe you're not doing the top. There's great college programs out there now, and even some of the kids who have some of the pragmatic language skills, social skills, there's all kinds of wonderful college programs out there now that work with kids that have different special needs. Maybe your child has different medical needs. There's a whole new world opening up for children with special needs that are within the college arena. Child find, I love this. This is one of my favorite rules. School districts often overlook this. So this is a really important law. Whenever you're saying, I'm really worried about Johnny, Johnny just doesn't seem to understand what's going on or in math, or seems to be getting really frustrating, and I'm sitting down with homework and just really struggling. Child find requires a school district to evaluate your child in all areas of suspected disability. That suspected disability can come from you. I'm asking Johnny to do 3 things in a row. Johnny's not remembering anything that I'm saying. I don't understand why Johnny's not understanding. Is this an auditory processing disability? Is this a language processing disability? Is this, is this a side effect from medication? Is this, what's going on? So the district has an obligation to start the testing and to evaluate in all areas. This is a mandate. It applies to kids within the state, including those that go to private school. Maybe your child's in Catholic school, Jewish school, whatever kind of school. This still applies. So if your child is in a Catholic school, it's up to the school district where the Catholic school is located. And there's that mandate still applies, and the district still has to do the testing. So even if you're, so sometimes school districts say, oh yeah, but they're passing, they're doing great. That doesn't matter. That's like saying you have diabetes and you don't have a disability. or you have only one leg and you don't have a disability, or you have a spinal cord injury and you don't have a disability because you have straight A's. That's not what a disability is. So child fund's a really interesting thing to keep in mind. Evaluations. So you always have the opportunity, and it's a wonderful thing if you can afford to get a private evaluations. Depending on where you live, I live in the Connecticut, New York area, evaluations can be $4,000 to $5,000 a pop. That's a nice chunk of change. If you have the ability to pay for a private evaluation by a wonderful, 5 minutes left? Oh boy, oh, too much chitter chatter going on. That's great, but districts only have to consider private evaluations. They have a right to do their own. So you can have districts do the private evaluations. If you disagree with them, you have a right to an independent educational evaluation paid for at district expense. Next. Section 504, have to level the playing field for kids with disabilities. 504 plan, I'm going to rush now, I only have 5 minutes, I have 3 slides left. So 504, accommodations, level the playing field. Camp, extracurricular activities, summer camp, you can have age, you can have kids with you. You want your kid to be in soccer camp, swimming, all those things. The town, the school districts, they have to provide someone for your child. Oh, this one's really important. You need accommodations for school. It's like you have to be 3 steps ahead. You have to get the appropriate letters from your providers. And if you could go to the next slide, you want to use the language from the American Disability Act. I have that language in my handouts. The substantial impact, you need to use that language and use the language. Can you go back, actually? I'd like to do that slide instead. The major life activities, the major bodily functions, immune system. There's a non-exclusive list of major life activities: sleeping, thinking, communicating, hearing, seeing, walking. You want all that information within your letters from your medical doctors, and you also want to list the accommodations that you recommend for your child in speaking with your medical provider. That's the letter that you want to come from your doctor on the accommodations. And you need to brainstorm, and that's the letter you want to go to your school when you're requesting accommodations for your child. A refrigerator in the classroom, the exact dietary request that you need for your child, the lines on the pavement. You want to let them know exactly what your child needs: a late start time, what type of modifications that need to be made to the work. And last one, that's the issue. Whether you need an IEP or a 504, that's going to determine the nature of your child's disability. The IEP is going to be individualized to your child. It's going to be set on your child's present level of performance. It's not their age. It's not their grade level. That has nothing to do with it. It's individualized. They have to look at your child's present levels of performance. And it's a whole team decision that's very, very important. It covers speech and language, OT, PT, depending on all the different needs: academic, cognitive, could be emotional, behavioral. You may have a certified behaviorist involved. You may have a functional behavior plan. There can be a lot of things involved in this. Or you may have a 504 plan, and you're going to have accommodations and modifications. Everyone in the school must follow this: aides, therapists, teachers. And there's ways that you can call meetings and convene meetings. I have a lot more information on the web. You have my email. I can provide general information. I can't provide specific information. I encourage you to reach out to me with any general questions. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tisha Brown. I am an interim principal at an elementary school in Austin, Texas, and I'm very glad to be here today. So the purpose of my being here is one of the greatest challenges when you have children that have special needs, and it's how do you work collaboratively with the school? Because I'm sure there are many, many stories that you could share about the difficulties that you have faced with the school districts. And as I'm a parent of a special needs child, and I have also faced those difficulties, but I think what's really critical is the recognition that however difficult the situation may be with the district, we're going to become better advocates for our children if we're working collaboratively with the schools. And so the purpose of my being here today is to help explain some of the ways in which you can be more successful in working collaboratively with the schools. And this really begins with building strong parent-teacher-child relationships. And one of my biggest tips that I can give for parents is to just remember that the majority of teachers really are there because they care for children. They are there because they want to make a difference in the world and they want to help children. And sometimes the challenges that arise in a school system are not always the teacher's fault, and the teachers don't always have a lot of say in what they're allowed to offer and what they're allowed to do. So the more collaboratively you work with the individual teachers, the better relationship you're going to have with the person who is dealing directly with your child day in and day out. And that's really the bottom line for us. And so one of the things that I always recommend is before school starts, actually scheduling a meeting with your child's teacher. And the younger they are, the more it's going to be a parent-led thing. But as your children become older, including them throughout that entire process and giving them opportunities to self-advocate with your presence will be really powerful and important. And at this meeting, one of the things that you can talk about is what does the school team want to know? So the school team, and when I say school team, I'm mainly talking about the individual teachers and the aides and the administrators that are going to be working directly with your child. What they want to know is they want to know more about the illness or the disease or the condition that your child is facing. What are the struggles? What are the challenges? But more importantly, what are your child's strengths? What are your child's likes? What are your child's dislikes? They want to hear your story. Yes, the medical information is really important, but if you want to build a relationship with your child's teacher and your child's school team, they need to hear your story, and they need to hear how incredible your child is. So one of the, it seems kind of simplistic to me, as I stand up here right now, and I think it's one of the most challenging things for parents and for administrators is how to figure out how to be an advocate for your child and respectfully do so at all times. Because sometimes they don't deserve the respect that you need to give them. And I think that's one of the realities. But if we develop an adversarial relationship, the only person that's really hurt by that is my child. Is your child. And so how can you get what you need for your child when you're working with a school system that may be, pushing back against you and for what you want? The school team needs to know the specifics about your child's illness. What medications does your child take and what are the side effects? If I'm with your child 6 hours a day, I am a really good source of information for you in terms of this medication isn't working or it's causing this side effect. And if you're sharing that information with your children's teachers, they will be more of partners with you when it comes to things like that. Teachers and aides want to know, how does your child's condition affect them in a lot of different areas? How does it affect them socially? How can we provide support? What does your child need in order to be successful socially, emotionally, physically, cognitively? So how are all of these things done? And in the initial meeting that you're holding with the school team, these are the concepts to cover. This is my child's condition. This is how it affects him or her socially. This is how it affects them cognitively, academically. Then the next piece to that is you are the expert when it comes to your child, and you're also the expert when it comes to the condition, because we're talking about rare diseases, and the teachers aren't going to have the information to know how to address specific things for your child. So sharing with them strategies that have worked for you in the past. strategies that have not worked in the past. Those things are also really beneficial and helpful. The most important thing that you can do prior to meeting with your school team is to write out your parent concerns. And this is my number one recommendation, whether you are going for a 504 meeting or an IEP meeting. Write out your parent concerns and send them to the school district in an electronic format prior to your meeting, and request that those be included in the IEP. And you have the right as a parent to have all of your concerns addressed during those meetings. One of the things that schools do is we schedule IEP meetings during teachers' planning periods in Texas, and I think it's probably a pretty common practice throughout the country, and those last about 45 minutes. We cannot discuss everything that needs to be discussed to really, truly, adequately individualize your child's plan in 45 minutes. So you have the right to also ask, can we please schedule that towards the end of the day? I think it might go longer than 45 minutes. And there isn't a magic law that cuts you off at 45 minutes. So if the school is really pushing to kind of end those IEP meetings and to get things finished before the teachers have to leave, that is something that you can discuss ahead of time and just say, this is going to be a longer ARD. And that also helps them make plans for covering your child's, covering the classroom. Okay, so what to say at a school meeting? The biggest thing is tell your child's story. Share. Who are they as a person? They're not the condition. There's so much more than that. And so share who your child really is and help them get to know your child in a way that only you can do. Another thing that's really important about advocacy, and my top recommendation is a book called From Emotions to Advocacy, and you can find it on a website called rightslaw.com. And that book is amazing because it helps you really go through the steps that you need to go through as a parent in order to convey the messages that need to be conveyed for your child's benefit. And so that book has really helped me as an educator as well to be more open to listening to what is it that this child really needs and how can we work collaboratively to make this happen. One of the things that the school needs to know is what strategies really work for your child. And where it becomes frustrating, I think, is when we have these wonderful suggestions and then the school district comes back and says, oh, we can't do that. And that is so frustrating for both sides. And so how can we make it work? When you're butting up against a wall, rather than keep hitting your head into it, let's find a way around the wall. Let's go under the wall. Let's find a solution that's going to work for you and that's going to work for me. Because really the bottom line is meeting the child's needs. And if a school is telling you we can't do it that way, come with other solutions. Come with other strategies and suggest, well, if that doesn't work, is there something else that we could do? And the word we being the critical word there. What not to say at a school team meeting. There's a lot. Don't say what you're really thinking sometimes. So I think school team meetings are, when you're there for an IEP meeting or you're there for a 504 meeting, those are not the times to discuss particular teachers and their deficits. Those are additional meetings that you can schedule individually with your principals. I think those, if you are coming into an IEP meeting and a 504 meeting and you're needing to rehash things that have happened in the past, you're using your time in a way that isn't as effective as you could be for your child. So my recommendation to you is if there is a problem with the school, schedule a meeting that is not an IEP meeting with the administrators. Tell them what the problem is, work with them collaboratively to solve it to the best of your abilities. Then when you're in your IEP and your 504 plan meetings, you can focus on your child's needs and you can focus on the future and so you've really messed up in the past, but how are you going to fix this? So at the IEP meetings and the 504 plan meetings, you're focused on what are we doing moving forward, because I can rehash all the things that have gone wrong in the past, but that doesn't help my child now. And yes, those need to be addressed, but address those in a separate meeting. I'm sorry, I'm now technologically, there we go. What information to bring? So specifics about your child's illness or disease, specifics about what works for them, what works for you as a family, and share your communication strategies. One of the things that is most beneficial is if you have outside therapists. I know there's some reluctance to share medical information, and I completely respect that. But if you have an outside therapist that has information about your child that can help me be a better teacher, then please share that with me. Your teachers want to hear what works. And so the therapists are often the experts that have that information. In terms of documentation, I do recommend that you bring to the meetings your latest communication that you've had with the teachers. Bring report cards, bring your test records, bring your reports from your physicians, and provide copies of those reports to the team in advance of these meetings, because while they are not required to implement them exactly, they do need to consider them. And, you know, hopefully, as educators, we're open-minded enough to recognize that if a physical therapist is recommending X, Y, and Z, that would be beneficial for this child, that we are going to do our best to implement those as well. And the more documentation that you have like that, the better that you will work together with your team. How to hit the reset button. What I mean by this is things have gone south, the school district hasn't done what they've promised, and they haven't met your child's needs in a way in which they needed to have done so. But your child still has 4 to 5 years of school. They still have 7 years of school left within this school district. What are we going to do in order to hit that reset button? How do you rebuild relationships after they've gone south? And my number one piece of advice on this is that each year you have a new teacher. It's like hitting a reset button again. And every time that you come across a new administrator or a new aide, it does give you an opportunity to start building a positive relationship. But it also means that you have to let what was in the past, you have to hold that in a different pocket, if you will. Don't let go of it, and certainly don't forget it, because it is essential for your child's success. But don't let what previous teachers and administrators have done color the relationships of the current year's teachers and administrators. So let's see. I think that is all for me.
My name's Grossman. I'm the mother of a 20-year-old, and I have to be honest with you, when I was told that I would be speaking with a school principal and an attorney, I thought this could get ugly really fast. But so far we've worked well together, and it would be really nice to have a principal who understood where I was coming from the past 20 years, as well as an attorney like Piper down the street. That would have made things easy. So this is my daughter Lily in elementary school, and she is balanced there in front of that logo. She has a mutation called ADCY5 related dyskinesia, which makes her have symptoms like cerebral palsy, epilepsy, or mitochondrial disease. So she is physically disabled severely. She's in a full power chair. She was using a walker at this point in her life because she was in one classroom and it worked out well, but when she got to 6th grade, moving for 5 classes, that doesn't work so well anymore. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the academic, the medical, special diet that she's on, therapies while she was in school, and social interaction. And obviously I can't tell you everything in 15 minutes, so you're welcome to contact me afterwards. But as far as the IEP, that's a really stressful thing, and I have a lot of tips on it. For example, I always scheduled it in February. That's when Lily's birthday is. And it's not when every other student is having an IEP meeting like in the spring. So you get a little bit more attention. I always took the list of things that Lily was supposed to be able to do physically and academically. I got it off the internet. I would find out, what is a fourth grader supposed to be doing? And I would circle all the things that she wasn't able to do. I would pick maybe 3 that would fall into physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech, and adaptive gym. And I would make goals that way. I was the one who wrote the IEP, and you can do the same thing. Don't make it overwhelming. Pick the things that you feel that your child needs help with, and then work with your school to make that happen. So Lily was, when she was in preschool and moving into kindergarten, it was recommended that she be put into special education. And the reason was she was getting those 4 different therapies that I was mentioning, PT, OT, speech, and adaptive gym. And they said because she's getting 3 or more, we put her in special education. And I said, well, that doesn't really sound right to me. So that was my first battle of public education. So she was moved into a typical classroom, which meant that we as parents had to do a lot of the adaptation so that she could be successful in school. This is her in a chemistry class in high school. So you can imagine, Lily can't pick up the beakers and pour chemicals, so let's get her a lab partner because she's really smart and they're going to be happy that she's the one taking notes. Lily takes medications 4 times a day. We had schools that didn't have a school nurse. We had medications that had to be broken in half and put into a capsule so she could swallow it more easily. And we worked with the school and we just said, look, you don't have to hire a nurse just for our child. That's a big expense for the school. I'd rather you see or use your resources in a different way. So we supplied the medications for Lily to go to school, and her aide is the one who helped Lily take the medications. She did not have a medical degree, and as I discussed with Tisha and Piper yesterday, that might not be what the law is, but that's what worked in our situation. She's also on a special diet. This is Lily with her sorority sisters in college, and I can't see her. Is she in that? Oh, she is in that picture. I thought that wouldn't be good if I didn't include her. So she's on a special diet. She doesn't eat wheat, corn, soy, dairy, or sugar. It was an adjustment. It was an educational experience learning how to do that. I bought cookbooks that would be dairy-free, and I bought another one that was wheat-free. I made a list of everything that she wanted to eat, and I figured out how to make everything from waffles and cookies and all kinds of things. And kids would come to my house, and I would serve them the same food that Lily had, and a lot of them liked it better. So therapies in gym class. I spoke yesterday, I don't know how many of you were there, but one of the things I recommend is having a log that your aide or your teacher has, so you can write down when your child has therapies and what they were working on so that you can help and give suggestions. I think that what Tisha said as far as sharing your story and working with people that work with your child is the most important thing you can do, because you can abbreviate trying to figure these things out. I mean, think about for you, if you walk up to a child who is in a wheelchair and might not be verbally responsive to you the first time you say hello to them, how would you know how to help them best with their education? And so give them all the seeds you can to help them, help your child blossom. This is my daughter with her friend Grace, who they're still friends today, but this is in kindergarten. And we used to live in Cleveland, Ohio, where, it gets really hot and really cold, and there's not much in between. And so Lily went to school in a building that was built in the 1920s, and it was very hot with steam heat. So I used to send her to school, because she's temperature sensitive, in shorts and a short sleeve shirt, even in the middle of winter when it would be 15 degrees. And when the other kids would go out to play, they wouldn't go out unless it was 20 degrees, if that makes you feel better. But when it would be 20 degrees, or, by the time you change Lily's clothes and then take her outside, now the half-hour recess is over. And so we worked it out that Lily could pick a couple kids every day, and they would run around in the gym, so Lily wouldn't have to take the time to change her clothes, and she would still be able to have recess, and she'd be able to do things with her friends. So field trips and extracurriculars, I could talk about 3 hours on this one. But in the state of California, there are many opportunities to go on field trips, whether it's a day field trip or overnight, even out of state. So what we did, my husband and I did to accommodate for this was a lot of times I went on field trips before Lily went. If there was a day field trip in elementary school, I would go and I would see, like, one was the tall ships. How is she getting on the boat? What are they doing on the boat? Are there any activities that Lily would be excluded from because she wouldn't physically be able to do it, and how could I help figure out how to accommodate that so that she could have the full experience on the field trip? This is a picture of her in Seattle where they went to go sing at Boeing with the school choir. That's it. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask all three of us, whichever one.
And I'll bring the microphone over to everyone so that, that when it's recorded, they can hear it.
Hello? Thank you. All right. I just have one question, just like a quick statement. In early intervention, I guess Piper, this would be for you. Is there an acceptable amount of like a wait list? I had gotten my son speech therapy because he wasn't saying anything and he was 2.5. And being nervous because my older son has CDLS. And they're like, well, you're on a wait list because there's just, I guess, to high demands. And I'm like, a wait list? I'm like, I've never heard of such a thing. I'm like, this is ridiculous. And I thought she was trying to pull my leg. I'm like, I've been doing this a long time with my older son, so don't jerk me around. And she's like, no, really, there's a wait list. And my son never got to see a therapist because he turned 3. And then he saw a therapist because, I took him to private places and, enrolled him in like a little preschool just to kind of be exposed until he can go into. He just started his district and he's getting speech there, but I just never heard of that before. And when I had brought it up to other speech, therapists, and they're like, oh, I've never heard of that. Is that an acceptable thing? Because I've never heard of that before. And how long do you wait for your kid to get services?
So if your child qualified for speech and language services under birth to 3, there should be no wait list. It's called Compensatory Education. And you can go to, you might want to seek the advice of an attorney to help you out on that, and you would likely have a right to compensatory education for lost services.
Okay.
If your child qualified under birth to 3 for speech and language services, you may also have a right to get those services made up through a private speech and language.
Yeah, I just wanted to know going forward if just to have the information, because he's already at school age now, so I'm like, well, he's already getting it at school, but he should never have had to do that. And I shouldn't have had to pay, at the hospital, the copay, because they took my insurance, and then the school was $115 a month, the private, whatever was around the block that would take them. I'm like, that's a lot of money. So I didn't know if that was acceptable. But okay, so at least I know for future, just to have for someone else if it happens. And as far as with the IEPs, or for my son's, it's been 15 years, for his first CPSE meeting or whatever it was, aging out of early intervention, one of the best things I did for the first few years is I brought somebody with me, like an advocate, and that was so helpful because, she told me what to do, and I just learned so much from it. And the first one was his speech teacher that would come to the house from early intervention. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. She's like, I'll go with you. I'm like, all right. And she did, and then she helped, and she said these big fancy words, and it kind of made me feel more confident that I wasn't bullied or walked on, or at least felt like that. So I think it's important, and if you feel like that, to make sure you bring somebody, or even if later in life you have a conflict, so, bring somebody with you that can kind of say you're not doing the right thing, that's not okay, and kind of help you out a little bit. It's just I've been there before, so it's just I want to share that.
I have, okay.
My name is Mariana Summer, and
Okay, sorry. So, Ms. Grossman, I wanted to ask you a question, Ms. Paul. So first with Ms. Grossman, so she's in a private school, and I guess my concern is like she's really advanced cognitively, but like there's no obviously like she can't get therapy at school, you know, like did that interfere for you, like trying to get her, I mean, like with their schooling? I'm just afraid, like, I don't know, I mean, I don't know if there's a way to get therapy in a private school, or if maybe it's better to do it outside, or
Well,
like how that interferes with.
My daughter never went to a private school. She was always in public schools.
Oh, okay.
So they might have a better answer to that on the law of private schools, but we made a conscious choice to go to public schools so we could get the services.
Oh, okay.
But speaking to the woman who asked a question before you, which kind of piggybacks on what you're asking me as far as getting services, there was a time when Lily wasn't getting physical therapy because they didn't have a physical therapist. They were in between hiring. And when they did hire someone, their solution was, well, now to catch up, because I was saying, how are you going to make up for that past time? And they said, well, to catch up, we'll just schedule it twice a week. And, you know, you're dealing with someone who has an energy deficiency disease. And so what they ended up doing was Lily had, outside of school, she had aquatic therapy. And the school district paid for aquatic therapy to make up for that time.
Oh, how do you do that?
If you want to,
Okay.
sure.
And then, oh, okay, sorry, yeah.
So under the federal law, under IDEA, there's actually a provision so that even if your child is attending a private school, you can still receive what are called proportionate share services. The catch to proportionate share services are that you go through the school district for their evaluation as if you were going to create an individual education plan, an IEP. And then they end up creating a specialized service plan so that your child can receive services at the private school. The school districts have, because it's a proportionate share system, certain school districts will actually limit the type of services that are provided through proportionate share at private schools. So for example, the district where I work only provides speech therapy through their proportionate share services. But there are districts that will also provide PT and OT through this process. And to access that, it's part of the child find that Piper talked about. Typically you go to your local elementary school and you know, say, I want my child evaluated, and here's why.
Yeah.
And that's how you get that process started.
Yeah, I mean,
Can I ask one more question? Sorry.
Your mic.
Or Ms. Paul, I didn't get your email. It's not on the app either.
my email?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm,
it wasn't on the
oh,
app.
there I am. I'm ppaul@piperpaullaw.com.
Oh,
But
okay,
yeah,
there
so
it
I
is.
would
Okay,
recommend
I'm
that
sorry.
you contact your district, and that you state you would like your daughter evaluated, have a comprehensive psychoeducational evaluation, a speech and language evaluation, and, you know, in the areas of evaluation. Send that to the Director of Special Education, and if you don't hear back within 3 days, politely send the email again. Keep everything in writing, because if things are not in writing, people are very busy, they can be overlooked. If you get a response back by the phone, follow up in writing. Thank you very much for the phone call. I'm just following up to your phone call. Would very much like to follow up on the evaluation. It's possible the testing could be done in the school district where your daughter's in the private school, but you want to set that in motion.
Yeah, that with our experience with our son, we started with the school district, but working with our home therapists, they urged us to look into a very specific private setting, and the process really required the school district to write the initial IEP, and we had to basically move forward with it. But once we placed him in that private school setting, they had the opportunity to make modifications to it. And from there, all of the services were being provided. Now, the only caveat to that is that the private school that he's going to was specifically for special needs kids. So some of their framework was already there. But my understanding with the way the funding works, and this may vary from state to state, the money is there for that school, and it's just a matter of them, you know, allocating the services for it. I've heard, and I don't know if this is true, Piper might be able to respond to this, but the private school settings may not necessarily be the best placement, and that might be grounds for them to not provide the service. And it's ultimately really the school district. They're the ones that are, responsible, or it actually has to be done, or they have to figure out a way. Where the private school doesn't necessarily have to provide that service. They may, have you go back to the school district to figure out what to do.
Hi, I just wanted to address your question as well. I'm a retired superintendent and special education administrator, and I know the requirements vary from state to state, but another option for a child who is attending a private school, and I would assume this might be like a Catholic or some type of, not a special needs private school, but a regular private school. There's a third option that's not been brought up. It's called dual enrollment, in which the child would be enrolled in the public school for the services that your child might need. And they can spend the rest of their day at the private school, and then they are transported to the public school for, let's say, speech or PT or OT or whatever those services your child might need that cannot be provided at the private school. So, if you're happy with your private school, except for the provision of services, you may want to look into that option. Yeah, that's a great idea, and that's wonderful what you said. It's offered in some states, but not all. But I think that's really wonderful to see if that's offered in your state.
Hi, my question is for Piper on something you spoke about earlier. As far as extracurricular activities,
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit more about that? That's not involved in the school and even camps?
Sure.
Because that's an issue.
Yeah, so that's under Section 504 protection, irregardless of whether or not your child has an IEP. So if your child wants to go to so that's going to happen whenever there's federal funding, which is almost pretty much everywhere. Even a lot of the private schools receive funding. Not always, but when you start looking for it or you ask questions, are there scholarships, anything in lunch? You pay anything for that nice-looking football field over there? Believe it or not, when you start looking around, a lot of the private schools receive a little money here and there. So once you find that there's some federal funding, which is a lot of your summer camps, your child has a disability, you're going to look at the language under the American Disability Act. Substantial limitation. It was in one of the slides, and if you want more specific language, you can follow up with me. I think it's in the handouts. I sort of put that out a little more. Then your child has a right to an aid. So you're going to want the letter from the doctor that's going to state why your child, if you're looking for a one-on-one aid. Maybe your child wants to play basketball or wants to be in the camp, or maybe wants to be in the swim class, but you really want the person there one-on-one. That has to be provided at zero cost to you. You do not pay for that. Does that include city week things? Yes, it does. Yes, say after school curricular activity. Maybe you want your kid to stay after school for those activities in the camp. They would have a right to one-on-one aid. Any of the trips, your child has a right to an aid. If your child qualifies for the aid, yes, and needs that support, yes.
And one last question. She's in a power wheelchair, and we're in the gray area where the special needs, disability league doesn't quite fit her. So we went to a regular softball team in the city league. And we just practiced with them, but the commissioner has said she's never allowed to be in a game. I don't really feel comfortable with her being on the field, but she's never allowed to participate, because what we do is in practice games we have her run the bases, and she's smart. She knows all the rules and what to do. But he told me, he's like, she's not allowed to be in a game.
So you actually may have some different issues there. It's got to be reasonable accommodations. There may
Okay.
be some other municipal rules regarding physical danger, worrying about her getting injured or other injuries that may sort of circumvent that, because there
Okay.
are some limitations on that.
Okay.
But there may be some other things that she can actually do. So if she's in the power wheelchair, there actually may be some limitations on that.
Okay.
But like swim class or maybe some other type things, playing in a softball league, that might be a little more difficult.
Okay. But
Yeah.
camps, that's
Yeah,
encouraging.
camps, absolutely.
Hi, so I just had some questions, I guess, with approach to school administration. I've already been pegged as that mom. And it's not because I've been outwardly disrespectful, but I'm very to the point in my questions and my expectations from the teacher level to the aide to the administration. So I feel like anytime I have a recommendation, they automatically become defensive, and there's just not an open dialogue that's comfortable. And I don't know how to peel that back to say, okay, this is really, I'm not trying to be a pain in your butt. I just need the best for my daughter. And how can we accomplish that together? But it's already been conveyed to me, so she'll transition into the next age group for school next year, that they'll be passing along information specifically related to me. So I don't know how to even...
I'll answer that. I would love to address that.
Yeah, it's not me.
I was told that my file says I'm a high-profile mother. And I told my daughter's aide when she told me that, I said, well, I'm going to take that as a compliment. You're not there to make friends with people. You're there to get the best education for your child. So I don't think anybody needs to feel badly about it, but you have to make sure that when you go into these meetings and when you're talking to people that you are being respectful and you're not swearing in IEP meetings, you know, and just like they were saying, like there are lots of things I thought of that I didn't say. That's why I always recommend that you have conversations through email, make your suggestions through email, because one, you have the documentation of it, and also because then you're not going to get in that emotional back and forth. And, you know, I always tried to keep in mind that teachers are pulled in a million different directions, and there's no way they can just focus on my child. So suggestions that I can make, I made sure I was very familiar with what my rights were, like no rights law, no idea, know what your rights are, so that when you're asking for something, you have something to back it up. And if you have a suggestion for how to make things better for your child in the classroom, you know, can your neurologist perhaps write a letter for you? And I have written letters and given them to my neurologist and said, this would really help out. You know, could you give me a letter on your letterhead that says that this, you know, this is important for Lily, for example, the special diet or whatever they weren't really seeing as a need, but I saw as an important need. So I think just get over the fact that, you know, I don't care that they don't like me. They don't like me. But I don't think that the people who did their jobs, I got along with them really well. I'll just tell you a short story so we can get to somebody else's questions. But when my daughter started kindergarten, so I'm very early in the process, right? And I meet with the school psychologist, and she's probably been in the school for like 3 weeks. And the school psychologist says to me, you know, Mrs. Grossman, it's really nice to meet you, but I have to tell you, your reputation precedes you. And I said, really? Well, you know, tell me about that. And he said, well, I think, you know, people think you're difficult to work with. And I said, okay, well, let's talk about who doesn't think I'm difficult to work with. You know, my daughter's teacher and I get along really well. My daughter's aide, who spends a lot of time with her and a lot of time with me, we get along really well. And you're right, the occupational therapist and I don't get along, because the occupational therapist said to me that she couldn't accommodate for Lily's tremors and helping her learn how to, you know, paste things on a piece of paper. And that wasn't okay with me, because that's what the therapists are there to do, right? To teach them how to accommodate. So, you know, I was pegged probably in preschool. And I will tell you that when just about 6 months ago, I got a text from a woman. I didn't know who she was, and she was asking me to help her friend in another school district. And I said, could you just remind me how I know you? And she said, oh, I worked at your daughter's high school. And I thought, oh my gosh, she must think I'm horrible, right? And she said, I just want you to know that the school is a much better place after you and your daughter were here. So I don't apologize for anything.
I think the number one thing sometimes is to acknowledge the elephant in the room. And sometimes if you're with a new school team, just acknowledging, there have been some issues in the past, and I'm really looking forward to working with you and working collaboratively and coming up together with some solutions to, some of the challenges that we face together. I think one of the pitfalls that parents can fall into is when the language in the meetings becomes an us versus them. And so whether that's on the school district's side, that they're the ones doing an us versus them, or if it's on the parent side, because it does feel adversarial, I think the more that you can do to try to acknowledge that this is really a problem that we are having together. Let's continue to work on this together. How can I help support you as a school? How can I help support the teacher? And I think asking those questions will go a long way towards helping to dissipate the I don't know what the right word is, but to dissipate the idea that you are a difficult parent. I would wear the I'm a difficult parent hat with pride, because you are your child's number one advocate, and you do know a lot of times what's best for your child. I think the educational setting, they are experts in how to educate, but that's for the general population. And so I think, it's really essential that when you are sharing specialized information about your particular child, it's, no one likes the know-it-all, right? So it's done in a way of, let's collaborate on this together, because this is what's going to work best for my child.
Hi, I'm Diana Campbell, leiomyosarcoma survivor, and I'm on the PLB board in New York City. There's a lot of issues with our whole Department of Education, especially with what we call the District 75 children. And we're always advocating and fighting. Matter of fact, the state still owes $10 billion to the DOE in New York State, okay? So those special needs kids, we're always advocating for them. There's not enough legal help for the parents. What do you suggest? And the legal help they are getting, they're overwhelmed. So where else can they move to get assisted and make sure their children are getting the needs they deserve and they legally deserve? And they're not. There's over 50,000 homeless children. Let's look at that. They are totally deprived in addition. So what do you suggest for legally? Where do the parents go? Because they're on a list, a waiting list, trying to get needs assessment.
I unfortunately don't have an answer.
Yeah.
I wish I did. I think it's a societal problem.
Okay. Any parents up there if your children was in New York?
There might be some advocacy groups that work with some of the families.
Yeah, we do. We have tons. That's
So,
what we're doing every day.
I only hired an attorney, Lily, sophomore year in high school. That was the first time I had to hire an attorney, and that was because I couldn't get her to have access into classrooms that were upstairs that didn't have, they didn't have a way out of the building. So what I did before ever hiring an attorney, because I think an attorney is very helpful and it definitely abbreviated our situation, but I hired that attorney because there was a law that I knew that they were not following, and it was, it was just talking to a brick wall, and it was the only way for me to move forward on it. But what I did before that, so that it wasn't just me, is I always had a friend go with me to the IEP meetings, even if they were just taking notes. I always use the resources at hospitals as far as social workers, the doctors, the nurses, anyone I could work with who had a piece that could fit on the story that I needed to get a service for Lily. So any physical therapist, therapists that they're getting in school or out of school, anybody that you interact with, I'm sure there are many people that every child interacts with for some kind of service or medical condition. And those are the resources that you can use to kind of build your case for what you need to move forward on something.
What about legal assistance on the federal level? Where does that go?
You're talking about that there's families that need legal representation and they're that are limited in resources, and some of the families that are actually homeless, and how do they get service? I mean, there's an organization called COPA.org. I'm not sure, like, I'll always have, and I know some attorneys will always have pro bono cases going, but we also have to pay our light bill, so I'll always have a caseload, but I have to limit how many cases I can have. And I don't know, I'll approach the organization. I don't know if there's a movement that some people will take a certain number of cases, but maybe some of those organizations may make a commitment that some of the attorneys will take some. But again, that's just the New York State attorneys. It is an overall problem, though. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry we've run a little over, so I apologize. If you have any other questions, please submit them on the app. But I would like to thank our presenters for joining us, and now we'll head out to lunch, which is sponsored by Pfizer. And thank you.